Hey, Bobby Balo from Raytown Productions here, and today we're going to be talking about drum compression, and I'm going to shoot out a bunch of different compressors, and you're going to hear for yourself which ones sound the best. The compressors we're going to shoot out are FabFilter's Pro C2, SoundToys Devil Lock Deluxe, Sonimus Tuco compressor, IK Multimedia's TR5 Black 1176 plugin, and finally, Waves SSL compressor. I'm also going to share my thoughts on using the plugins in general and how to dial them in so that you can make better sounding music. But before we jump into the video, I do have a gift for you. It is my free downloadable guide to compression. It has everything you need to know about compression techniques, the different styles of compressors, how to dial them in, and I even have a cheat sheet for some go-to timings for different instruments. So if that sounds helpful, be sure to check it out. There's a link in the description to get you that download. The song today is by a band out of Washington, D.C. called Deer Spring. This song is called Gold Walls, and it has these like really big, powerful, raw drum sounds. So I'm really excited to shoot out these different compressors with these tracks. And if you like what you hear, please go and support the band. I have a link to their music in the description. All right, let's jump into this session. So let me just play this track so you get a sense of what it sounds like. Yeah, so you hear just big, powerful drums, and this is the perfect song to really get into drum bus compressors because it's going to add a lot of cool movement and really fill out that space and make this track sound massive. So we'll start by just soloing the drums, and then I'll go through all the different plugins so you can hear what they sound like. And then later on in the video, we'll play everything in context so you can get an idea of what it sounds like in an actual mix. First up is FabFilter Pro C2. This is an incredible compressor, and I like it for a few reasons. One is this sidechain feature, which allows us to change the detection circuit of the compressor. What that means is that if the kick drum is making the compressor react too far, we can just set up a high-pass filter and then roll off all the low energy so then the compressor doesn't ever see the kick drum. So this will help you dial in the amount of movement that you want for a particular track. So let's turn this up. I have the settings set to pumpy. They have a bunch of different settings. They have bus, punch. Pumpy seems to sound really cool for a big open drum track like this. So let's just see what we come up with. So when you're dialing in a drum bus compressor, you probably want to have a little bit of attack on it, meaning let's let some of the drum transient go through, and then we're going to clamp down on it. And so we can be pretty aggressive with this. So let's just play with some settings and get a nice pump going with the groove of this song. Awesome. Another feature I really like about FabFilter Pro C2 is this mix knob down here. And we can actually go above 100%. We can go all the way up to 200%, so we can double the effect. So this allows us to dial in a nice amount of parallel compression so that we're not being too heavy-handed with the compressor. Right? Way too much. But there's this beautiful movement that's happening around 56%. So I'm just going to leave that. Let's go on to the next compressor. This is one of my favorites. This is Waves SSL compressor. And this is my go-to compressor for rock drums. So I'm excited to shoot this out. The timings for the attack and release tend to work really well for drums. So let's play this and see what it sounds like. A fast attack setting like this might sound good on a drum room bus, but for just a regular drum bus with all the different tracks feeding into it, we're going to need a little bit more attack. Again, we want to let that punch go all the way through instead of just being clamped down right away. So listen to how the punch of the drums opens up as we roll this to longer and longer attack times. Here we go. And so for this track, I think 30 milliseconds is like the magic number. And then we can also adjust these release timings, and that's just going to change the movement. So really short release is going to sound more consistent with less movement or less pumpiness. And then as we dial this to slower and slower release times, then we're going to start getting a lot more movement, and it's also going to feel like the drums are going back a little bit. But in this case, I think the 0.3 seconds setting is probably the best. See how much it just wakes up the drums. It's pretty awesome compressor. All right, so this is a new one for me. This is by a company called Sonimus. It's their Tuco compressor. It's based on a variable mute style compressor, which I love because it adds a lot of cool vibe to drums. And I will say I'm really impressed by this. This might be something I'm going to be using a lot more of. On this compressor, it has all the different little features that I use and I wish all the other compressors had. So for example, they have an auto gain makeup feature, which allows you to make a more objective decision if the compression that you're dialing in sounds better. So as you're increasing the amount of compression, it's adjusting the output volume so that it's the same level all the time. It's super helpful for quickly dialing in a drum compressor. To turn that on, you actually have to click the amount button here and then turn the auto makeup gain enabled. Now, when you turn up, this is basically threshold, but when you turn this up, it's going to offset the output volume, which is super helpful. There's also a mix knob, which I think is so important for a drum bus compressor so that you can maintain some of those initial transients that you have. And then also they have this really cool feature, which is like a tube drive saturation knob. So I like big, almost borderline distorted, pumpy drums on a rock track like this. So this has everything I would ever want. And then they also have a side chain high pass filter right here. And this does the same thing that FabFilter Pro C2 compressor does, where it allows you to not look at the kick drum level so that if it's getting too pumpy because the kick drum's too powerful, you can adjust this high pass filter so that it ignores the kick drum and it makes the compressor react a lot less. That way you can glue the drums together without it sounding super overly pumpy. Okay, so let's see how it sounds. So with the release really long, again, it has a smoother sound to it. It also feels like the drums are pushed away, but we get a really cool, vibey movement when we tighten up the release. And again, we can just dial this mix knob back so that it blends in the movement that we're adding with the transients. There's also 4 different styles of compression that you can choose from that I didn't mention. This one is a slow attack compressor, and then we have a fast attack. So that's going to make sure that those transients do not come through. And then we also have a slow attack limiter and then a fast attack limiter. So if we want to really get insane amounts of movement and pumpiness, let's switch it over to this limiter style because this is a higher compression ratio. So listen to how much movement we can add to a drum bus. I mean, you can you could almost get seasick, right? I mean, there's so much movement. It's a really cool compressor. And if you put this on something like a drum room bus, you can make your drums sound so massive. And that's probably where this is now going to live for me. All right, next on the list is IK Multimedia's Black 1176. This plugin sounds pretty awesome as well. I have a analog hardware unit of an 1176, so I know it pretty intimately well. I would say this sounds pretty close. The distortion characteristics of it all sound really good. So let's see what this sounds like. I have it set to 4-to-1, and we're just going to really bite into it again with a slow attack and a fast release. And remember, on 1176 style compressors, a lower number attack means that it is slower. The faster attack is actually the higher number. So it's kind of backwards from the other compressors we just looked at, but I'll just play with these knobs a little bit so you can hear how it reacts to the drums. I always like a really slow attack on 1176 compressor because we need to let some of the punch come through. With these compressors, they're really, really fast, meaning they're going to catch a lot of the transient information. So we need to really back off on this attack. And then this release, again, is used to just dial in that movement. So I like a really fast release on this style compression, and it just gives a really aggressive and bright, in-your-face kind of sound to drums. So let's listen. It's cool, but it's too smooth. You hear how it really wakes up the room in this drum kit. Pretty cool. Finally, another one of my secret weapons is SoundToys Devil Lock. This is, I don't even know if you would consider a compressor. They say it's an audio level destroyer, but I don't know. It sounds pretty cool on drums to me. So this one doesn't really have a threshold setting. They just have a mix knob. And then you can adjust the amount of crush, which is the amount of compression, or the amount of crunch, which is drive or some sort of distortion or saturation. And then they just have two settings for release. I flip back and forth between these two a lot. Right now, I've been liking the slow setting more. And then darkness helps to roll off some of the overly bright top end that you're going to get from cymbals sometimes when you use this aggressively. But on a drum bus, we really don't want to use it too aggressively because it's going to completely destroy our drums. I'll show you. Let me just unbypass this, and then we'll ride this mix knob up, and you'll hear how crazy this thing is. Pretty wild, right? I mean, it's the most aggressive thing I've ever heard, period. So there's a reason why my settings usually are the crush on 1, the crunch on 1, and the mix on 1. It's because it's just so over the top. But it adds a really, really cool, aggressive movement to the drums that will make them sound wider and bigger than any of these other plugins. So let me just show you what it sounds like as we dial this up, and then we can bypass it to hear what it's doing. Already like way too much. Listen to how wide the drums get when we re-enable this. It's a pretty cool little plugin. So there you have it. That is the comparison of just the drums. Now what I'm going to do is just play the full mix back so you can hear everything in context and see which ones you like the best. also at the very end, I'll pull up all the different plugins on my screen so you can take a screenshot and use those settings in your session if you like. All right, here we go. We're going to start with out any compression. Here are all the different drum settings that I have for this video. So if you like one of these compressors more than another one, you can just copy those settings and drop them right into your music. So my initial thoughts on this whole thing is that the FabFilter Pro C compressor has a cool movement. It sounds really, really, really clean to me. The SSL style compressor has a lot of punch and movement, but I really wish they had a dry wet knob to help us dial in that last little bit of transient punch. The Tuco compressor is really cool. It doesn't sound super overly bright to me, which is important because cymbals on a drum bus can get really unruly if you do too much compression. But because of how this is designed, it's got a really, really nice movement and it sounds smooth to me throughout the entire spectrum. So when you really push it a little bit harder than you should, it sounds relatively natural and gives the drums just a nice glue and vibe. The 1176 by IK Multimedia sounds just like my 1176 in my studio. It is very fast. It catches a lot of the drum transients, so it's going to help in situations where the drums might be overly punchy. So it'll help level things out a little bit, and then also is very bright and open sounding. So it's going to highlight those cymbals, it's going to highlight the room, and just make things sound very modern. And this little monster SoundToys Devil Lock just sounds amazing if you're going for a dirty drum sound. It really highlights the rooms and it maintains the transients when you have really low mix values here. Once you start dialing above 1.5, things get crazy really fast. So a little bit of seasoning with the Devil Lock might be just what you need to make your drums really pop. So question for you guys, what compressors are you using on your drum bus? Let me know in the comments and let's start a discussion. If I missed a compressor that you really wanted me to shoot out, let me know that as well because I can always make another video on this. As always, if you found this video helpful, be sure to hit that thumbs up so YouTube knows it's a good video, it's going to help people. And the best thank you you can give me is to just share this video or another one of mine with an online community or some friends that also make music that might need a little bit of help. Don't forget to go and grab that free downloadable ebook that I have for you in the description, and I hope to see you in another video.